Coming to chapter 27 of Katzang's board reviews, we have skeletal muscle relaxants. So, drugs that relax the skeletal muscles are divided into two dissimilar groups. Okay, the neuromuscular blocking drugs or NM blockers, which act at the skeletal neuromuscular junction. They are used to produce muscle paralysis to facilitate surgery or assisted ventilation, because you need to kind of relax the muscles in order to ventilate the person, right? And the other group includes the spasmolytic drugs, most of which act in the CNS, and they are used to reduce abnormally elevated muscle tone caused by neurological or muscle end plate disease. So, spasmolytic, they're breaking down the muscle spasms. Otherwise, you have the neuromuscular blockers. So, skeletal muscle relaxants are divided into two separate groups, okay, two dissimilar groups. So, they are neuromuscular blockers and spasmolytics. So, neuromuscular blockers, they are used to produce muscle paralysis to facilitate surgery or assisted ventilation. So, again in neuromuscular blockers, we have two categories, non-depolarizing and depolarizing. So, in depolarizing, you have succinylcholine, okay, which works by persistent depolarization of the NMJ. And coming to non-depolarizing, we have long action and intermediate action drugs. So, long acting drugs include tubocurarine, okay, which is a competitive inhibitor, and intermediate action we have rocuronium, okay. Coming to spasmolytics, we have chronic use and acute use. So, acute use we have cyclobenzaprine. So, if it is acute, okay, let's say that you have to travel an acute distance or a short distance, you go via cycle, right? You go via bicycle. So, cyclobenzaprine by cycle, so cyclobenzapine. And then chronic use we have CNS action and muscle action. So, muscle action we have dantrolene, and CNS action we have baclofen, diazepam, and tizanidine. Okay. So, coming to neuromuscular blocking drugs, starting with the classification and the prototypes. Skeletal muscle contraction is evoked by motor neurons that release acetylcholine, which binds nicotinic cholineceptors. So, okay. So, skeletal muscle contraction is evoked by motor neurons. Okay, this is the motor neuron end plate that release acetylcholine, okay, into the cleft, and then into it is uptaken. So, blockade of transmission at the end plate, the post-synaptic structure bearing the nicotinic receptors. Okay, so this is the end plate, it bears nicotinic ACH receptors. Okay, so blockade of transmission here at the end plate is clinically useful in producing muscle relaxation, which is a requirement for surgical relaxation, tracheal intubation, and control of ventilation. The neuromuscular blockers are quaternary amines, usually structurally related to acetylcholine, ACH. So, these blockers are structurally related to ACH. That is why they act via competitive inhibition, okay, such as tubocurarine. Okay. So, most are antagonists, non-depolarizing type, and the prototype is tubocurarine. One neuromuscular blocker used clinically, succinylcholine. In the name itself, choline is there, right? So, acetylcholine, succinylcholine, they are chemically similar when you talk about their structures. So, succinylcholine, it is used clinically and it is an agonist at the nicotinic end plate receptor. So, it is a depolarizing type, it works by persistent depolarization. Neuromuscular blocking drugs do not enter the CNS and have no effect on cognition, memory, or sensory input, including perception of pain. So they have no effect on any CNS effects. Coming to non-depolarizing neuromuscular blocking drugs, coming to the pharmacokinetics, all neuromuscular blockers are given parenterally. They are highly polar drugs because they are quaternary amines and they do not cross the blood-brain barrier. So that is why they do not have any CNS effects. Drugs that are metabolized, such as mivacurium, withdrawn in the US now, or eliminated in the bile, such as rocuronium, which is an intermediate acting drug, we have talked about it here. So, rocuronium have shorter durations of action, such as 10 to 20 minutes, than those eliminated by the kidney, such as metocurine, pancuronium, pipacuronium, and tubocurarine, which usually have durations of action of 35 to 60 minutes. In addition to hepatic metabolism, atracurium clearance involves rapid spontaneous breakdown via Hoffman elimination to form laudanosine and other products. At high blood levels, laudanosine may cause seizures, Thus, atracurium is rarely used because its metabolite or hepatic metabolites, laudanosine, after Hoffman elimination, can cause seizures at high blood levels. Cisatracurium, okay, cisatracurium or cisatracurium, a stereoisomer of atracurium, is also inactivated spontaneously but forms less laudanosine and is currently one of the muscle relaxants most commonly used in clinical practice. So, what is it? Cis atracurium. So, you have cis and trans forms, right? So, cis atracurium is a stereoisomer of atracurium and it is used because it produces less laudanosine. So, less blood levels, the chance for developing seizures is less. So, let us look at some high yield terms before we move on to the mechanism of action. So, depolarizing blockade, so neuromuscular paralysis that results from persistent depolarization of the end plate, such as succinylcholine. So, succinylcholine, while writing S, you write it like this, right? So, S, 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 okay, you can remember it like that. So, persistent depolarization. Desensitization, it means a phase of blockade by a depolarizing blocker during which the end plate repolarizes but is less than normally responsive to agonists. So, they include acetylcholine or succinylcholine. Okay, they desensitize the end plate. So, it is a phase of blockade by a depolarizing blocker during which the end plate repolarizes but is less than normally responsive to agonists. So, malignant hyperthermia is hyperthermia that results from massive release of calcium from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, leading to uncontrolled contraction and stimulation of metabolism in skeletal muscle, which leads to heat generation. So, hyperthermia. Okay, malignant hyperthermia, it's something associated with calcium release from sarcoplasmic reticulum, leading to excessive skeletal muscle activity and metabolism, thus generating heat. So, malignant hyperthermia is involved with Ca+2 release from sarcoplasmic reticulum. Non-depolarizing blockade is neuromuscular paralysis that results from pharmacological antagonism at the acetylcholine receptor of the end plate. So, that is by tubocurarine, by competitive inhibition. So, we have spasmolytic drugs. So, they are drugs that reduce abnormally elevated muscle tone or spasm without paralysis, okay, such as baclofen and dantrolene. And we also have stabilizing blockade, and this term is a synonym for non-depolarizing blockade. So, what is non-depolarizing blockade? So, it is paralysis that results from pharmacological antagonism at the receptor. Okay. So, coming to the mechanism of action of NM drugs. So, non-depolarizing drugs prevent the action of ACH at the skeletal muscle end plate. Okay. So, you can see that in this figure. So, they act as surmountable blockers. Thus, the blockade can be overcome by increasing the amount of ACH in the synaptic cleft. That is, they act by a competitive mechanism. They behave as though they compete with ACH at the receptor, and their effect is reversed by cholinesterase inhibitors. Okay. So, as you can see here, so ACH is a normal agonist. Alright, you can see that as in the form of this black thing here. Okay. So, it opens the sodium channel. This is, let's say this is a sodium channel. So, ACH, when it binds here, it opens the sodium channel. That is the normal action. So, here what is shown is a non-depolarizing blocker. Okay. So, a non-depolarizing blocker, what it does is when it binds to the receptor, it prevents the opening of the channel. Okay, it competes. Okay, and thus it blocks it. Whereas succinylcholine, okay, it acts by persistent depolarization. So, it is a depolarizing blocker. So, what it does is when it binds, it causes initial depolarization with fasciculation and persistent depolarization of the channel, okay, which leads to muscle relaxation. So, it is open but it is blocked. Non-depolarizing blocker, the channel is closed and it is blocked. Okay, non-depolarizing blockers, we have curarine, tubocurarine and the other ones, right? So, that is why they don't do anything to alter the depolarization status. What they do is they kind of close the channel. Okay, they act as surmountable blockers. They prevent the action of ACH at the end plate by preventing the by closing the channel. Okay, So their effect is reversed by cholinesterase inhibitors. So they behave as though they compete with ACH at the receptor, so competitive inhibition. Some drugs in this group may also act directly to plug the ion channel operated by the nicotinic ACH receptor, so that is why they close the channel. Post-tetanic potentiation is preserved in the presence of these agents, but tension during tetanus fades rapidly. Okay, so larger muscles such as the abdominal muscles and the diaphragm are more resistant to neuromuscular blockade, but they recover more rapidly than smaller muscles such as facial muscles and hand muscles. Of the available non-depolarizing drugs, rocuronium has the most rapid onset time, so 60 to 120 seconds. So rocuronium is rapid, R for R. Coming to the depolarizing neuromuscular blocking drugs, let's start with the pharmacokinetics. So succinylcholine is composed of two ACH molecules linked end to end. So if this is one ACH molecule and this is another ACH molecule, they're linked end to end and this forms succinylcholine. Okay, so succinylcholine is metabolized by a cholinesterase called butyrylcholinesterase or pseudocholinesterase in the liver and plasma, but it is largely resistant to acetylcholinesterase. So it has a duration of action of only a few minutes if given as a single dose. So blockade may be prolonged in patients with genetic variants of plasma cholinesterase that metabolize succinylcholine very slowly. Such variant cholinesterases are resistant to the inhibitory action of dibucane, which can be used to detect the mutant form. Succinylcholine is not rapidly hydrolyzed by acetylcholinesterase. Coming to the mechanism of action, it is a nicotinic agonist and depolarizes the neuromuscular end plate. Okay, it is a nicotinic agonist and acts by persistent depolarization. So the initial depolarization is often accompanied by twitching and fasciculations, prevented by pre-treatment with small doses of a non-depolarizing blocker. Because tension cannot be maintained in skeletal muscle without periodic repolarization and depolarization, continuous depolarization results in muscle relaxation and paralysis. So succinylcholine may also plug the end plate channels. So at low doses and phase 1 block, twitch tension is reduced but does not fade during a tetanic stimulus. Post-tetanic potentiation is abolished. So when given by continuous infusion, the effect of succinylcholine changes from continuous depolarization or phase 1 to gradual repolarization with resistance to depolarization phase 2. Okay, such as a Kirari-like block, as you can see in this table right here. So phase 1 means continuous depolarization. Okay, so continuous depolarization. Phase 2 is nothing but resistance to depolarization. So gradual repolarization, resistance to depolarization. Okay, so coming to the process, so first administration of tubocurarine, which is a non-depolarizing NM blocker. So rocuronium is additive. Okay, phase 1, so it is antagonistic and phase 2 is augmented. Okay, it is not known properly. And then administration of succinylcholine, see it is antagonistic. Okay, so it is antagonistic. Then rocuronium is antagonistic, it is additive. Phase 1 is additive and phase 2 is augmented. Effect of neostigmine, okay, you can just look at this table right here. Coming to the reversal of blockade, we have something called Sugammadex. It is a chemical antagonist of rocuronium, a rapid acting drug. Okay, rocuronium is rapid acting and also has an activity against vecuronium. The Sugammadex NM blocker chelation product is then excreted in the urine. So we have rocuronium and we have Sugammadex. Okay, this chelation product is then excreted in the urine. Okay, this is a chemical antagonist. So the action of all non-depolarizing blockers is readily reversed by increasing the concentration of normal transmitter at the receptors. This is best accomplished by administration of cholinesterase inhibitors such as neostigmine or pyridostigmine. Okay, so in contrast, The paralysis produced by depolarizing blocker succinylcholine is increased by cholinesterase inhibitors during phase 1. During phase 2, the block produced by succinylcholine is usually reversible by cholinesterase inhibitors. Coming to the toxicity, we have respiratory paralysis. So the action of full doses of neuromuscular blockers leads directly to respiratory paralysis. If mechanical ventilation is not provided, the patient will asphyxiate. Okay. So coming to the autonomic effects and histamine release, autonomic ganglia are stimulated by succinylcholine and weakly blocked by tubocurarine. Succinylcholine activates cardiac muscarinic receptors, whereas pancuronium is a moderate blocking agent and causes tachycardia. So tubocurarine and mivacurium are the most likely of these agents to cause histamine release, but it may also occur to a slight extent with atracurium and succinylcholine. So tubocurarine, tube, okay, it kind of sounds like a blood vessel, right? Tube. So in blood vessels you have histamine release, right? So you can remember it like that. So they are more likely to cause histamine release, tubocurarine and mivacurium. So vecuronium and several newer non-depolarizing drugs such as cis-atracurium, doxacurium and pepecuronium and rocuronium, they have no significant effects on autonomic functions or histamine release. And then coming to the specific effects of succinylcholine, muscle pain is a common post-op complaint and muscle damage may occur. Succinylcholine may cause hyperkalemia, especially in patients with burns or spinal cord injury, peripheral nerve dysfunction or muscular dystrophy. So increases in intragastric pressure caused by fasciculations may promote regurgitation with possible aspiration of gastric contents. Coming to the drug interactions, so inhaled anesthetics, especially isoflurane, strongly potentiate and prolong neuromuscular blockade. A rare interaction of succinylcholine with inhaled anesthetics can result in malignant hyperthermia. An early sign of this is potentially life-threatening condition, okay, is the contraction of the jaw muscles, which is called trismus or trismus. Aminoglycoside antibiotics and antiarrhythmic drugs may potentiate and prolong the relaxant action of neuromuscular blockers to a lesser degree. So coming to effects of aging and diseases, older patients greater than 75 years of age and those with myasthenia gravis are more sensitive to the actions of non-depolarizing blockers, and doses should be reduced in these patients. Conversely, patients with severe burns or those who suffer from upper motor neuron disease are less responsive to the agents, probably as a result of proliferation of extrajunctional nicotinic receptors. Patients with renal failure often have decreased levels of plasma cholinesterase, thus prolonging the duration of action of succinylcholine. So let us just look at this table right here. Okay, so non-depolarizing drugs, atracuronium, okay, it is very safe, but the thing is, if it produces excessive levels of the hepatic metabolite, what was the name again? Laudanosine. So if it produces excessive levels of laudanosine, then it is harmful because it may cause seizures. But it has no effects on autonomic ganglia, no effect on cardiac muscarinic receptors, and slight ability to release histamine. Whereas cis-atracuronium, the stereoisomer, is very safe. So no effect on autonomic ganglia, no effect on cardiac muscarinic receptors, and no effect on histamine release. Rocuronium, it slightly blocks the effect of cardiac muscarinic receptors because it acts rapidly, it doesn't think about the effects on the heart. There's a slight block, okay. Pancuronium, there's a moderate block, okay. Okay, like almost, right? So moderate block. Tubocurarine, it weakly blocks the autonomic ganglia and moderately releases histamine. So tube, okay. Tubocurarine, in the blood vessel you have histamine release, right? So you can remember it like that. Vecuronium, again, there are no effects, no such effects. Coming to succinylcholine, it stimulates the autonomic ganglia. Succinylcholine stimulates the autonomic ganglia. It stimulates the cardiac muscarinic receptors. Slight release. So succinylcholine stimulates and slightly releases histamine. Stimulates the brain, that or the ganglia, stimulates the heart, okay, or cardiac muscarinic receptors, and releases histamine also. Coming to the skill keeper, tubercularine can block bradycardia caused by phenylephrine but has no effect on bradycardia caused by neostigmine. So let's talk about that later. Coming to the second category of spasmolytic drugs. So certain chronic diseases of the CNS such as cerebral palsy or multiple sclerosis or stroke are associated with abnormally high reflex activity in the neuronal pathways that control skeletal muscle. The result is a painful spasm. Bladder control and anal sphincter control are also affected in most cases and may require autonomic drugs for management. In other circumstances, acute injury or inflammation of the muscle leads to spasm and pain. Such temporary spasm can sometimes be reduced with appropriate drug therapy. The goal of spasmolytic therapy in both chronic and acute conditions is the reduction of excessive skeletal muscle tone without reduction of strength. So, reduced spasm results in reduction of pain and improved mobility. So, coming to drugs for chronic spasm classification, the spasmolytic drugs do not resemble ACH in structure or effect. They act in the CNS and in one case in the skeletal muscle cell rather than at the neuromuscular end plate. So, they act in the CNS, okay, or in some cases in the cell, skeletal muscle cell, but not at the neuromuscular end plate. So, the spasmolytic drugs used in the treatment of the chronic conditions mentioned previously include diazepam, a benzodiazepine, okay, baclofen, a GABA agonist, GABA. So, baclo, okay, in the back, GABA. So, it is a GABA agonist. And then we have tizanidine or tizanidine, a congener of clonidine, okay, and dantrolene, an agent that acts on the sarcoplasmic reticulum of the skeletal muscle. So, dantrolene. So, it acts on the sarcoplasmic reticulum, okay, reticulum. దాంట్లో ఏముంది, it acts on sarcoplasmic reticulum. Dantrolene acts on sarcoplasmic reticulum. These agents are usually administered by the oral route. Refractory cases may respond to chronic intrathecal administration of baclofen. Okay. So, botulinum toxin injected into selected muscles can reduce pain caused by severe spasm and also has application for ophthalmic purposes and in more generalized spastic disorders such as cerebral palsy. Gabapentin and pregabalin, which are anti-seizure drugs, have been shown to be effective spasmolytics in patients with multiple sclerosis. Coming to the mechanisms of action, the spasmolytic drugs act by several mechanisms. Three of the drugs, so baclofen, baclo-GABA, so GABA agonist, diazepam, which is benzodiazepine, and tizanidine or tizanidine, which is congener of clonidine. Okay, they act in the spinal cord. So, baclofen acts as a GABA B agonist at both presynaptic and postsynaptic receptors, causing membrane hyperpolarization. Presynaptically, baclofen decreases the release of excitatory transmitter glutamic acid by increasing K plus efflux and reducing calcium influx. So, K plus efflux increases, calcium influx decreases, okay, and it causes hyperpolarization at the presynaptic level. At postsynaptic receptors, it facilitates the inhibitory action of GABA. So, this is all at the presynaptic. At the postsynaptic, it releases GABA. So, diazepam facilitates GABA mediated inhibition via its interaction with GABA A receptors. So, diazepam GABA A receptors, so it facilitates GABA mediated inhibition. Tizanidine, an imidazoline related to clonidine with significant alpha 2 agonist activity, reinforces presynaptic inhibition in the spinal cord. So, tizanidine, presynaptic inhibition. So, all three drugs reduce the tonic output of the primary spinal motor neurons. Dantrolene, sarcoplasmic reticulum. So, it acts in the skeletal muscle cell to reduce the release of activator calcium from the sarcoplasmic reticulum via interaction with the ryanodine receptors RYR1 or RYR1 channel. Okay, so we have dihydropyridine and the ryanodine receptors, right? So, it interacts with the ryanodine receptors and reduces the calcium release from sarcoplasmic reticulum within the muscle cell. So, cardiac muscle and smooth muscles are minimally depressed. Dantrolene is also effective in the treatment of malignant hyperthermia, a disorder characterized by massive calcium release from the sarcoplasmic reticulum of the skeletal muscle. Though rare, malignant hyperthermia can be triggered by general anesthesia protocols that include succinylcholine or tubocurarine. In this emergency condition, dantrolene is given intravenously to block calcium release. So to block calcium release, what are you given? Dantrolene. Okay, C, D. So coming to the toxicity, the sedation produced by diazepam is significant but milder than that produced by other sedative hypnotic drugs at doses that induce equivalent muscle relaxation. Baclofen causes somewhat less sedation than diazepam, and tolerance occurs with chronic use. Withdrawal should be accomplished slowly. Tizanidine may cause asthenia, drowsiness, dry mouth, and hypotension. Dantrolene causes significant muscle weakness because it is interfering with calcium release, but less sedation than diazepam or baclofen. So let us just look at this figure right here. So this shows the sites of spasmolytic action of benzodiazepines. So benzodiazepines, what they do is, so for example, you have baclofen. Baclofen, what it does, it acts at the presynaptic level. Okay, baclofen, it acts at the presynaptic level, and what it does is it increases K plus efflux, decreases calcium influx, and at the same time causes hyperpolarization of the at the presynaptic level. At the postsynaptic level, what it does is baclofen, baclo-GABA. So it inhibits the it causes the, I'm sorry. So baclofen, what it does is it acts as a GABA release, GABA agonist, right? So at the postsynaptic level, it uh, facilitates the inhibitory action of GABA. At the presynaptic level, it reduces the release of excitatory neurotransmitter glutamine. Okay, whereas coming to benzodiazepines, what they do is they also cause the effects of GABA on GABA A receptors. Okay, and tizanidine acts like clonidine, and it kind of, tizanidine presynaptic inhibition. Okay, it reinforces presynaptic inhibition. So that is what is shown in this figure right here. So that's what's shown. So they all have an effect on action potentials. So dantrolene acts directly on the skeletal muscle cell on the ryanodine receptors in the tubules in the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay, so which directly influences the motor neuron. Okay, so you have certain tracks that terminate on these motor neurons, so that is being affected. Tizanidine, it has an effect on presynaptic inhibition. So drugs for acute muscle spasm, we have many drugs such as cyclobenzaprine, so bicycle, short distances acute, metaxalone, methocarbamol, and orphenadrine. They are promoted for the treatment of acute spasm resulting from muscle injury. Most of these drugs are sedatives or act in the brainstem. So cyclobenzaprine, a typical member of this group, is believed to act in the brainstem, possibly by interfering with polysynaptic reflexes that maintain skeletal muscle tone. The drug is active by the oral route and has marked sedative and antimuscarinic actions. Cyclobenzaprine may cause confusion and visual hallucinations in some patients. None of these drugs used for acute spasm is effective in muscle spasm resulting from cerebral palsy or spinal cord injury. So one thing coming to skeletal muscle relaxants that we need to remember is that the drugs that have CNS effects, okay, they are taken orally, and okay, that is something we need to remember. And coming to the skill keeper answer, so reflex changes in heart rate involve ganglionic transmission. Activation of alpha 1 receptors on blood vessels by phenylephrine elicits a reflex bradycardia because mean blood pressure is increased. One of the characteristic effects of tubocurarine, okay, so it causes histamine release, and also it blocks autonomic ganglia, and this action can interfere with reflex changes in heart rate. Tubocurarine would not prevent bradycardia resulting from neostigmine, which is an inhibitor of acetylcholinesterase, because this occurs via stimulation by increased ACH of